The announcement that stopped me mid-workout. So I was looking at the news this morning about he and I literally had to stop my workout. Literally stopped mid-set. I'm talking barbell down, phone out. Because what I just read was that insane. You see, we've been hearing rumors about tariff checks for months now. We heard maybe next year. We heard if the budget allows. We heard all these conditional statements that politicians love to throw around when they want to float an idea without fully committing to it. But yesterday, he didn't just double down on the $2,000 checks. He didn't just hint at it or suggest it might be possible. He put all the chips in the middle of the table. He went all in. He previously announced $2,000 stimulus checks, or as he calls them, dividends, targeting mid-2026, but that's not even the headline. That's not what made me put down the weights. The headline is how he plans to do it. The headline is the mechanism he's claiming he can use to bypass the entire system that's been in place since the founding of this country. He was asked if he needs approval for this money. The interviewer said, "Do you have to go through Congress on that, or do you think you can do that unilaterally?" And here's what he said. "I don't think we would have to go the Congress route, but, we'll find out. The reason that we're even talking about it is that we have so much money coming in from tariffs that we'll be able to issue at least a $2,000 dividend and also pay down debt for the country. But we do a $2,000 dividend to the people of our country, would probably set a limit of, income limit where it made sense, but we will be able to make a very substantial dividend to the people of our country. I believe we can do that without Congress." Now, let me pause right there because that last sentence is absolutely critical. I believe we can do that without Congress. That's not just a policy proposal. That's a constitutional question. That's a separation of powers issue. That's the kind of statement that makes constitutional lawyers start writing opinion pieces at 2 a.m. Let's look at the history here for context. In 2020, under COVID, he sent out checks. Those were the $2,200 checks, then later the $600 checks. In 2021, Biden sent checks, the $1,400 checks that were part of the American Rescue Plan. Did they go to Congress? Absolutely. They had to get the House and the Senate to vote on an appropriations bill. It went through the entire legislative process. There were debates, negotiations, amendments, votes, the whole thing. And there's a reason for that. Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. Let me read that again because it's really important. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury except when Congress passes a law saying you can do it. In other words, the power of the purse belongs to Congress, not the president. This isn't some technicality or some obscure rule that nobody pays attention to. This is one of the fundamental checks and balances built into the American system. The founders didn't trust any one person to control both the sword and the purse. The president commands the military, but Congress controls the money. That was the deal. But he is saying, no, this isn't tax money. This is tariff money. He's framing this like a company dividend. He's saying, I'm the CEO. We had a good quarter with China and Mexico, so I'm cutting a check to the shareholders. He's treating the American people like shareholders and tariff revenue like profit, basically saying, I don't need Congress. I made this money myself through my tariff negotiations, and I have to admit, it's brilliant marketing. The language here is genius. Calling it a dividend instead of a stimulus check changes how people think about it. A stimulus sounds like welfare. A dividend sounds like you earned it. You're a shareholder in America, Inc., and this is your return on investment. But is it legal? Because if he tries to bypass Congress, what happens? Well, Nancy Pelosi is retired now, but whoever is running the show in the Democratic leadership, Schumer, Jeffries, they are going to sue immediately. Within hours of any executive order being signed, there will be a lawsuit filed in federal court. They're going to say, you can't spend revenue without us. It doesn't matter if it's tariff revenue, tax revenue, or revenue from selling hot dogs outside the White House. All revenue goes into the Treasury, and Article 1, Section 9 says you need our permission to spend it, and they would win. At least they would win under a traditional reading of the Constitution. Any federal judge looking at this would say, yeah, the Constitution is pretty clear on this one. Congress controls spending, case closed, unless he finds some obscure loophole in the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 or some emergency power that says the president has discretion over tariff funds. Maybe there's some provision that says tariff revenue can be allocated by executive order for specific purposes. Maybe there's some national security justification that could be stretched to cover this. But that is a massive stretch. I mean, you would need a very creative legal team and a very sympathetic judge to buy that argument. You'd be asking the courts to essentially rewrite 200 years of constitutional law and say, actually, the president can spend money without Congress as long as he calls it a dividend and funds it with tariffs. Now, having said all that, let me play the politics for a second, because the legal question is one thing, but the political strategy here is something else entirely. Let's say he tries to send the checks. He signs the executive order in, let's say, May or June of 2026. Here's $2,000 for every American family making under a certain income threshold. And then the Democrats immediately sue to stop it, just like we all know they will. What do you think the headline is going to be? Think about it. What story is Fox News going to run? What's going to be on social media? What are Republican candidates going to say in their campaign ads? Bingo. The headline is, he tried to give you 2,000 each, and the Democrats stopped him. It doesn't even matter if his order was unconstitutional. It doesn't matter if the Democrats were legally correct to sue. The narrative becomes, the president wanted to give you money, but the other side blocked it because they hate him more than they love you. He doesn't even need to send the checks. He just needs the fight about the checks to happen right before the midterms. It's 4D chess, and I'm not even being sarcastic here. This is genuinely sophisticated political strategy. He wins if he sends the money because everyone gets $2,000 and remembers who gave it to them when they vote. He wins if the Democrats stop him from sending the money because he gets to campaign on, I tried, but they blocked me. Vote Republican so I can finally help you. We need to look at what this actually is, because headlines are one thing, the marketing is one thing, but the math is a totally different story. And I love math. Math doesn't lie. People lie. Politicians lie. Oh, but math tells the truth. So as a tax strategist at Karanspa.com, let's break down this $2,000 check. Where's the money coming from? Is it inflationary? Is this actually 4D chess? Or is this just buying votes for the midterms with borrowed money? And most importantly, what should you, the person watching this right now, do about it? But first, I have a question for you all. What happens in November 2026? What's special about that date? The midterm elections. Bingo. Every seat in the House of Representatives is up for election. A third of the Senate is up for election. And right now, the Republicans have very slim majorities in both chambers. They cannot afford to lose control. It's the keep the House and Senate stimulus package. That's what it is. And look, I'm not here to judge the morality of it. Every administration uses fiscal policy to support their political goals. This isn't unique to he, but I am here to judge the strategy, to look at the numbers, and to figure out whether this actually makes sense economically. Okay, let's look at the claim. The president says we are making so much money from tariffs, from China, from the EU, from Mexico, that we are going to give a dividend back to the shareholders of America. That's you, the citizens, he says mid-2026. Now, I will speak in a second on the logistics of this, but first let's just do basic arithmetic, basic math that anyone can follow. So if you had to guess, what's the population of the United States? Roughly 340 million people. Now, let's say they do this. Let's say they don't give it to the rich because he mentioned income limits. They cut off the top 10%, maybe the top 20%. Fine. Let's be generous and say they're targeting working and middle-class Americans. Let's say 250 million people get this check. Adults, maybe some kids, whatever. Could be households, could be individuals. Let's just use 250 million as our number to be conservative. 250 million people times $2,000 per person. Now let's look at the revenue side, because that's where this gets interesting. The president is saying this is funded by tariffs. We're taking in billions from China. We're making so much money from these trade deals. Okay, great line. I love the negotiating leverage here. I love the message it sends to other countries. But let's look at the Treasury report and see what tariffs actually bring in. Last year, total customs duties, all tariffs combined, brought in what? About 80 billion under the old rules. That's pre his new tariff regime. Now he ramps it up. He puts 25% tariffs on China, 10% on the EU, 20% on Mexico until they agree to his terms. So maybe if everything goes perfectly, we hit 200 billion in tariff revenue. Maybe if trade volumes stay high and people keep importing at the same rate despite higher prices, we hit $250 billion or even 300 billion. But here's the problem with that assumption. Tariffs reduce trade volume. When you put a 25% tax on Chinese goods, people buy less Chinese goods. They either buy from somewhere else, buy less overall, or American companies eat some of the cost, so tariff revenue doesn't scale linearly. You can't just say if 10% tariffs brought in $80 billion, then 25% tariffs will bring in $200 billion. It doesn't work that way. But let's be extremely generous. Let's say his tariffs bring in $300 billion in their first year. That would be almost quadrupling the previous tariff revenue. That would be an incredible result, honestly. So viewers, help me out here. If I'm running a business and I tell my investors, hey guys, good news, we made $250 million in sales, so I'm going to pay out a $500 million dividend, what happens to my company? Well, you probably would respond with, you're bankrupt, Karen, you're done. Your company is insolvent. You can't pay out more than you make. That's not how math works. And this is the classic government math where somehow losses make you a winner. Look, the deficit right now is already nearly $2 trillion per year. That means the government is spending $2 trillion more than it takes in through all forms of revenue. All taxes, all tariffs, all fees combined, and we're still $2 trillion short. So if you bring in $300 billion in tariffs, which is a huge assumption, by the way, because imports usually drop when you tax them, and you pay out $500 or $600 billion in dividend checks, the gap there is somewhere between $200 billion and $300 billion. Where does that come from? Where does that $200 billion shortfall get funded? It comes from issuing more T-bills, more treasury bonds, more government debt that someone has to buy. And who buys that debt? China, Japan, pension funds, the Federal Reserve. It's borrowing, it's deficit spending. It's inflationary because you're putting new money into the economy without a corresponding increase in goods and services. And this is what drives me a little crazy. The media is going to run their headline. He gives you money. CNN is saying it's fiscally irresponsible. It's reckless. It's going to cause inflation. Fox is saying it's a brilliant rebate. It's returning money to hardworking Americans. It's only fair after all the taxes we pay. But nobody asks the fundamental question, what is the incentive here? Why mid-2026? Why not now? Why not last year? Why not wait until 2027 when the tariffs have been in place longer and revenue is more predictable? The answer is obvious once you see it. November 2026, the midterm elections. The timing isn't a coincidence. The timing is the entire point. This is designed to hit bank accounts 4 to 6 months before people vote. Is it a bribe or is it politics? And look, I'm not here to judge the morality of it. I'm here to judge the strategy. If you are the CEO of America and your approval rating is fluctuating and you have these controversial tariffs that are making iPads and sneakers and cars more expensive, the people are feeling the pinch here. Inflation is ticking up because of the tariffs. When you put a 25% tariff on imported goods, who pays that? The consumer pays it. Companies pass the cost along. So people are paying more for everything and they're not happy about it. So how do you make it right for the customer? How do you win back their support? Well, you give them a rebate. You give them cash back. It's the same strategy that stores use when they overcharge you. Sorry about that price increase. Here's a store credit. And remember the velocity of money. This is important. If they drop this cash in June or July 2026, people spend it when? In August and September. The economy looks hot in October. Job numbers look good. Consumer spending is up. Retail sales are strong. Voters go to the polls in November feeling a little rich, feeling like things are going well, feeling like maybe this administration isn't so bad after all. And that's the entire game. That's what this is about. But let's talk about the danger here, because this is where I actually get concerned. as someone who studies economics and helps people with tax strategy. We spent 3 years fighting inflation. From 2021 to 2024, that was the story. Inflation hit 9%. The Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell specifically, raised interest rates from near zero to over 5%. And everyone started to feel the pain. The housing market froze. People couldn't afford mortgages anymore. First-time homebuyers were completely priced out. Small businesses, my guys, the entrepreneurs, they couldn't get loans. Business credit dried up. Credit card rates went to 25%, 28%, 30%. Now things are just starting to stabilize. Inflation is back down to around 3%. Jerome has lowered the rates a couple of times so far in 2025. The economy is finding a new equilibrium. And you want to inject $500 billion of stimulus money into the system right now? Here's my prediction, and you can hold me to this. If this happens, if $500 billion in checks hit the economy in mid-2026, you're going to see the price of everything go up again within 3 months. You get 2,000 deals, but guess what? Used cars go up $500. The car you were looking at in June that cost $18,000, now it's $18,500 in September because demand spiked. Rent goes up $100. Landlords see that everyone has extra cash, and they adjust accordingly. Groceries start to creep up again. That $150 grocery trip becomes $165. So yes, you got $2,000, but you're also going to spend an extra $1,200 over the next year on price increases that were caused by the stimulus. That's how inflation works. More dollars chasing the same amount of goods equals higher prices. But hold on, because there is another side to the story, and I want to be fair here. I also talked to everyday people, the guys waiting tables, the guys driving Ubers, the single moms working 2 jobs, and they don't really care about macroeconomics. They don't care about T-bills and deficit spending and inflation projections. They see $2,000 and say, finally, I can pay off my credit card. Finally, I can fix my car. Finally, I can catch up on rent. Finally, I can buy my kid the laptop they need for school. And that's real. That's not theoretical. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, which is like 60% of Americans right now, $2,000 is life-changing in the short term. It's the difference between having your electricity shut off or keeping the lights on. It's the difference between paying for a root canal or living with tooth pain for another 6 months. So isn't there a valid argument that this is better than sending $500 billion to some other country, better than foreign aid, better than corporate subsidies, better than Pentagon spending on projects that never get finished? At least this money goes directly to Americans who will spend it in the American economy. And that right there is a very strong argument. That's the populist argument. And that is the argument that wins elections. Because politics don't get elected on fiscal responsibility. Nobody campaigns on, we paid down the debt by 2%. Nobody gets excited about balanced budgets and long-term GDP projections. They get elected on, here is a check with my name on it. Here is tangible help that showed up in your mailbox. And he is a marketer, arguably one of the best we've had in politics. He understands branding. He understands messaging. He understands that people remember who helped them when they were struggling. He knows that if checks hit mailboxes or bank accounts in July 2026, the Republicans hold the Senate. They probably gain seats in the House. It's strictly a business move here. It's transactional. You give people money, they remember it when they vote. That's the calculation. And at the same time, it's a trap for the Democrats. Think about their position here. They're stuck. If they support it in Congress, he takes credit. The checks say tax dividend from President he or whatever he decides to call it, and he wins. If they block it in Congress, what does he say at every rally from June until November? I tried to give you $2,000, but Schumer and Jeffries said no. I negotiated these great trade deals, brought in all this money, and I wanted to give it back to you. But the Democrats in Congress stopped it because they hate me. You know, if we were playing chess, this is what we would call a checkmate, or at least a move where every response your opponent makes benefits you. He puts the ball in their court. If they pass it, he takes credit for giving everyone $2,000. If they block it, he blames them for stopping the money. Strategically, it's brilliant. Politically, it's genius. Economically, it might be disastrous. Constitutionally, it's questionable at best. But none of that might matter if the goal is winning elections, not managing the economy, or respecting constitutional norms. So what does this mean for you? What should you actually do with this information? First, don't count on the money. Don't make financial decisions based on a $2,000 check that may or may not arrive. Don't go out and spend money you don't have because you think this is coming. Too many people made that mistake with previous stimulus promises. Second, if the money does come, be strategic with it. Don't blow it on stuff you don't need. If you have high interest debt, credit cards at 25%, pay those off. That's the best return on investment you can get. If you don't have an emergency fund, put it in savings. If you have both of those covered, maybe invest it or use it for something that genuinely improves your life. Third, understand that this is a political move, not an economic move. The timing, the messaging, the constitutional questions, everything about this is designed for maximum political impact. That doesn't make it good or bad necessarily, but it helps to understand what you're looking at. And fourth, pay attention to what happens over the next few months. Does he actually sign an executive order? Do the Democrats sue? Does it go to court? What do legal experts say? What happens to inflation? Because all of this will tell you a lot about where the country is heading economically and politically. Look, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this is good economic policy or just good politics? Do you think he can legally do this without Congress? Do you even care about the legality if it means getting $2,000? I genuinely want to hear what you think because this affects all of us. If you like this video, please give it a like. It truly helps this video to reach more people. And I think this is information everyone should have regardless of their political views. My name is Karan, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll probably be talking about what happened with these checks. Take care.